Alright guys, welcome back. This is going to be part 2 on how to draw the eyes. If you remember, we left off by learning how to draw the eyeball itself. In this lesson we are actually going to be looking at how to add the tear ducts, the skin, the eyelids, the eyelashes, eyebrow to make the eyes unique. Before we get started, a couple of things. When we are doing our practice, I want you guys to actually practice using real photographs of eyes. There's a lot of ways to do this. So here are some examples of some eyes that I got offline. You can also use your phone to take photos of your own eyes. You can look at family members and look at what their eyes look like. So the reason for that is because I want you to see what the eyes actually look like rather than what you think they look like. So this is what I mean. A lot of the times when I work with students, some of the big mistakes that I see are, first of all, a lot of the students draw the eye kind of like a football, like this, and our eyes are not shaped like that. Okay. Often they start off with the skin around like this, and then they try to fit everything inside of that, and that causes some problems. Sometimes they draw the iris too small, then they draw the pupil, and then the eye doesn't look right. Everything, the proportions are way off. Another problem that I see with that is that they don't make this a circle, they make it more like a U. A third problem that I often see is that they'll do like a U, but then they have a hard time trying to center the pupil. So, and there's a whole lot more, but those are like super common. Another common one is they put the tear ducts in the middle of the eye. So they'll do a line like this, they'll draw the eye, and then leave the tear duct there. Well, that's not the location of the tear duct, so it makes the eye look a little off. So we're going to be looking at some things that will hopefully help you draw the eye properly. So remember that we are going to be starting with the eyeball, okay, and then we're going to look at specifics. Okay, so a couple of things to remember. First of all, when you are looking at an eyeball, remember that the skin is going to be changing quite a bit depending on the expression and how it sits on the eyeball itself, whether the eye is fully open, partially open, closed, etc. Okay, so the structure is not going to be the same every time. For example, this is what my eye looks like when I have it wide open, as far as I can open it. But this is what my eye looks like when it's relaxed. Okay, this is the one that I'm actually going to show you how to draw. Alright, rather than having to stop every few minutes because the phone keeps going on and off, I went ahead and made a print of my eye so we can take a look at it in detail. So the first thing that you're going to notice is the location of the tear duct. The tear duct is actually here. If we take a ruler and we place that and line this up to the back side, you'll notice that the tear duct is actually not in the center of the eye. So imagine this being the center of the eye. The tear duct is going to be below that. Okay. The second thing that you want to notice is that on this side right here, you can see the edge of the eyeball, but on this side you cannot. It's actually back here. Okay, and then as I mentioned earlier, you can see that the iris is quite large. The pupil is in the center. It's got to be in the exact center, and part of it will be covered with the skin. You can see the inner portion of the eyelid, the outer portion of the eyelid, and if you look at where the location of the eyelashes are, they're on the outer part, not the inner part. We don't want the eyelids to look like they're coming from the eyeball. On the upper part, you don't really see that. My eyelashes are relatively thick and down, so they look more like a dark mass. So we'll do that here in a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So the first thing that I want to do, and I'm going to kind of keep this just here. So I'm not going to try to start with all of the details. what I'm going to do first is I'm actually going to start with the entire eyeball, just like we did on the previous exercise. Try to do a good circle. Then we're going to find the center going this way, find the center going this way. Let's go ahead and put the pupil in. And in this particular photo, the pupil is not dilated quite as much as I was like at night. Okay, and then let's make sure that when we put the iris in, we're going about half the size of this circle. So I'm thinking about right there. Okay, so, and let's see if we can make a pretty good circle all the way around. Now I'm not going to shade this yet, but I do want to get this structure in here so you guys can see. Okay, so that looks like a target. Okay, first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to establish where the tear duct is going to go. Here's the edge of the eyeball, and when I look here, I can see the tear duct just outside of that now and below the center. So in my case, the tear duct has this triangular shape, but yours might be a little different. Okay, the next thing that I want to do is I'm going to come in. I'm going to change that just a little bit, and I notice that the inner portion of the eyelid right here is actually contacting the iris right here. Okay, and it has to look like it's wrapping around the eyeball. Okay, so it's going to touch right about here, and it wraps around the eyeball. Remember that on this side, we're not going to go all the way to the edge of the circle. We're actually going to stay inside of that. So in my case, it actually has this shape on the bottom. Okay. Then we move on to the top. When I look at the shape of my eye on the top, the eyelid, I have very thick eyelids. So we don't actually see the little crease up there. It's actually sagging, and it's covering quite a bit of the iris. So it's not touching the pupil, it's just above that, and it's about this angle here. And it's actually going to extend past this one. It overlaps like so, just a little bit. And then this over here, where the edge of this is actually going to go towards the tear duct. Okay. And then this goes this way past the tear duct. So the folds of my eyes overlap the iris and quite a bit. Now this is the inner portion of the eyelid on the bottom. This is the outer portion. This represents the thickness of the eyelid itself. I notice that when I get here, it kind of disappears and we don't see as much of it here. So like here is thin and it kind of just disappears there. The light source was coming straight on, so we actually see a whole bunch of little catch lights. I'm not going to do that many. I'm going to do one right about here, representing where the dominant catch light was, and I'm also going to put one here that we can actually see here. And so those are going to be really light when I do the shading. Now, when I look at the brow, the eyebrow, in my case, there's a nice little space right here. So it's going to be right in this area here, and I'm just going to represent it. I'm not going to draw the individual hairs yet. And it's going to stop just past the eye, the tear duct, like so. And in my case, the thickest part of the eyebrow is actually on this side right here. So I'm going to estimate where that is here, and then it kind of forms a bit of a triangle this way, and then along this area here. And then I can see this really nice deep shadow. I'll worry about that when I start the actual shading. But I'm going to go ahead and lay it in there just so as a reminder. Okay. So this is actually what my eye looks like when it's relaxed, and this is my right eye. Okay. So before I start the shading, I'm going to go ahead and eliminate the rest of the eyeball, right? Because I don't need all of it. But by placing the eyeball in there first, it pretty much ensures that everything is going to be correct. The proportions are going to be correct. So it eliminates a lot of this, all right? We're not making the iris too small, we're not putting it off center, we're making sure that the shape of the eye is correct and that they don't all look like footballs. So before I do any shading, let's take a look at some other eyes so that you guys can see how they differ from the one that I just finished. So these are Halle Berry's eyes. So if we look at the ruler and we place it across the tear ducts, you'll notice that the upper portion of her eyes, you can reveal a whole lot more than the lower portion. So if I were to put the ruler on this side and center it, there's only a very small amount of the eye that we can see on this side. But when we reverse that, we see a whole bunch of her eyes. Okay? So you'll notice that her eyes are not perfectly symmetrical. So like on this side, you can actually see the fold more so than you do on this side. And if you look closely here, the white area exposed on this side is a lot less than the one on this side. Okay? The eyeballs themselves, however, don't change, which is why I like to start with the entire eyeball and then lay the skin around it. So let's take a look at what this one looks like. So before we start the shading, I want to do a side view so that you can see the difference, and then we'll do a little bit of shading, and then you guys will be able to start practicing on your own. Alright, so we're going to just take a quick look at the side view, just a little bit, because we're actually, for our project, we're doing a front view. But just so that you guys can see what we were talking about the other day, is how far back the eye is from the eye, or from the brow. Okay, so looking at my photograph, you can actually see this is the location of the brow, but look at where the location of the eyeball is, and we can barely see the iris. We can't see the pupil at all, and then it comes back out, and notice that there's an angle there. Okay, so when you do the eyeball from the side view, make sure you don't come straight down. You got to push it back anywhere from 35 to 45 degrees. Okay, so I'm just going to show you what that looks like. I'm going to start off by drawing the entire eyeball, but this time we're going to look at it from a side view. So I'm going to draw a circle. And remember, I said that a lot of the circle is going to be covered when we draw the skin. That's why I wasn't overly concerned about whether it was perfect or not. So you'll have to think back to our other drawing, and you can see that the location of the iris from a profile view or side view is actually here. Right, still about half the size of this circle. The pupil is going to be centered in perspective, so it still looks like an oval, and it has to be centered from here to here, pointing in this direction. And then the cornea actually does this. This is that clear part that looks like a contact lens out here. So as I had mentioned in the previous one, make sure that when you put the pupil in, that you put it on the iris and not the cornea. Okay. So when we look at it from the side, this line right here covers a tremendous amount of the eyeball. Okay. So it's going to be about the center this way, and it's going to wrap around, and it's going to go past the eyeball. And this is for my eyes. Obviously, if you're looking at your own eyes, they're going to be different. So, and then it kind of comes straight up this way. Then there's a space here, and then that's where the nose would be. When you look at the lower one, you can notice that it's below this one. So this one overlaps this one. So don't start it back here. You're actually going to move it in, and it actually wraps around the eyeball in this direction. Okay. And you can clearly see the thickness of the eyelids. So in this case, this is the thickness of my eyelids. This way. The catch light is kind of towards the front here, so I'm just going to put a little catch light there. And then in my case, the skin just below the eyelid actually bounces outward this way. And that would, then my cheek would be like here. Okay. Then the eyebrow, you don't really see a ton, so it actually, my eyebrows are really thin on this side, so but they kind of end right about here, and they're relatively close to this line. And then the thicker part of my eyebrows are actually up here, to the point where they actually look like they're overlapping into the bridge of the nose. So I'm just going to represent them like this. And then my forehead is actually here. So when I erase what I don't see, right? I don't see the entire eyeball. This is actually what we're left with for my eyes. It's going to be different for yours, of course. And you can see, you can barely see it, but my eyelashes are coming in this direction for the top. So I'm just going to represent them for now. They're not very long. And then for the bottom, they're actually on the lower line, not the upper line, going this way. And there's a little catch light right here. So big difference between what the eye looks like from a side view versus what it looks like from a front view. So we're going to focus on these right here because that's what we're going to be working on in our project. Alright, so once you got the structure of the eye and you're happy with it, the last thing to do is the shading. And you guys are pretty good at shading, so I'm going to go ahead and speed through this part. But I'm going to point out a few things. I'm going to be doing my own eye, which is right here. And you can see, if you look closely, you can actually see that radiating pattern just like we did on our practice. You can see this darkish ring here all the way around. You can clearly see the catch light. And then the pupil is nice and dark. When you start doing the skin though, you have to pay attention to the different values. So for example, you notice that this is a highlighted area, so that tells me that the light's coming from the front. And the catch light also tells me that right here. As it goes down, as it wraps around this way, it starts to get a little bit of a shadow, so it's a soft shadow. Then you have this really deep dark shadow where my eyelashes are right here. On the lower part, you can see that this is like a mid-tone right here with a little bit of a catch light here. Because the light is coming from the front and slightly left, this portion of the eyeball looks darker than this side. And then there's a shadow here. Again, that goes back to trying to make the eyeball look three-dimensional. Okay. And then you can see the shadows on the skin here. So we have a light area here, some mid-tones here. And then the eyelashes, we want to overlap all of that. Same thing when I get ready to do the eyebrow. I'm actually going to do all of the shading first before I put in the hair strands for the eyebrow. So I'm going to do all that in speed mode, just so you guys can actually see what it looks like when it's done. I'm gonna go ahead and stop right there for now, but you guys should be able to get a really good indication as to how the shading is done. So shading, we've done it many times before. You just got to look for your darkest areas, your brightest areas, and then look for all of your different midtones. So you have light areas here, you have light midtone, dark areas, midtones. And the big thing, oops, I almost forgot, is make sure that you do your shading before you put in the eyebrow, the eyelashes, depending on what your picture looks like. Because when you start putting in things like eyelashes and eyebrows, you're going to be able to see the skin behind it. So it's going to be much easier for you to do the shading first and then put in the eyelashes or the hair, whatever kind of hair it is, rather than doing this first and then trying to fill in the little white areas in between them. So, and then make sure that you cluster these when you're looking at them. Don't do this, okay? They're kind of like bunched up and they're not all perfect. Okay? So you gotta pay attention to the direction that they're flowing and to how thick they are, and that's about it. So make sure that you leave that little white area there to separate the inner lid from the outer lid, or the thickness of the lid, I should say. Make sure that you're leaving your catch lights to make it look shiny. And notice that the eyeball itself is not pure white. So the whitest area is actually where the catch lights are going to be. Okay? I actually think that I'm going to do one additional video to kind of show you guys how to make a pair of eyeballs. If you can draw one eyeball, you can draw 1,000 of them. So the pairing them, it's a little tricky, but once you do some simple measurements, it actually becomes pretty easy. Okay, so we'll do that on the next one. All right, thanks. Bye.